Hello and welcome back to the Ghoul Guides Association. We are, as ever, your Ghoul Guides. My name is Lauren.
And I'm Mary.
And it is the festive season, which, as you might imagine, is not our favourite holiday because we are soey and girlies full of, through and through. But the festive season has its spooky moments, like Christmas Eve ghost stories around the fire.
I always think of Christmas as being like ghost season. So
Right?
we go straight from Halloween into like a season of ghosts.
Yeah. It's very Woman in Black, you know? Like, let me tell you this traumatic ghost story on Christmas Eve.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, we thought time to do some festive content. And in the past, we've done things like the history of Yule and some of the Christmas cryptids. Mary's been doing some work on saints recently.
Yes.
And we realised that lends itself very well to the content of this podcast.
Yes. So I have been working on saints and martyrs, and in the new year, hopefully we can do a couple more of these and kind
Yes,
of
please.
deep dive into the weird and wonderful and Gothic world of Christian saints and martyrs. So now if you have any favorites that you want to see us kind of talk about, then send us your comments or you know,
Let them come our way.
send them any way you want. But obviously, because it is the festive period, I thought that what better saint to start with than Saint Nick? So,
Good old Saint Nick himself, man of
yes,
many faces.
many faces. And we are going to, in this episode, kind of really focusing on the kind of the Gothic aspects of the myth, the legend himself.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Exactly. So obviously we all know him as Santa Claus. Lauren, can you just give us a brief TLDR of who is Santa Claus, if anyone is maybe not familiar with the legend that is Santa Claus?
So in Europe, broadly, there is a figure called Santa Claus or Sinterklaas. There's a couple of different variations of the name, but it is a figure that has a sort of folkloric quality, long white beard, often a long robe, and he comes on Christmas Eve and he gives the good children presents and the bad children coal. And he's often associated with things like mistletoe and holly, and he scares the shit out of children around the world every single year, either because their parents take them to see Santa and they are told to sit on the lap of a strange bearded man clad in red in a dark enclosed grotto, or because they're told he's watching their every move.
I mean, I'm so glad that you went there, because I was going to say, like, oh, there's nothing, like, Gothic about Santa Claus. But actually, I find Santa Claus, like, the legend, quite creepy. Like,
It is
he's
creepy. Were you scared of
like,
Santa as a kid?
I don't think I ever really thought about Santa that much. I wasn't really that interested.
So one of my earliest memories is going to see Santa for the first time. And this might be because there's quite an infamous photo of me. I was fucking terrified. Like, I remember sobbing. And then I remember, and this is probably the like, how did no one realize I was autistic? Being like, that's clearly a beard, like a fake
A
beard.
fake beard, yeah.
And like, that's clearly a polyester costume, and being really confused that we'd gone to see Santa, it wasn't real Santa. And I think my childhood brain obviously explained it out, but I can remember being really scared of the idea of Santa and being really scared. I mean, I also was scared. I think I've said this before on the pod, that I was scared of the goats from the Billy Goats Gruff, and I thought they were watching me for some reason. That's, you know, a problem for my future therapist, not for this podcast. But I definitely found Santa, both going to see Santa and the idea of Santa, really scary as a kid.
Yeah, I get it. I think there is just something that I find inherently weird about that idea that, like, you're being surveilled and also you're being judged. It's I think a little bit creepy. But obviously I grew up in a very Christian household, and Santa was obviously like there in terms of like children's and stories and things,
Yeah,
but it was mainly like, the kind of OG Christmas story that was
baby
front and
Jesus.
center. Yeah, yeah. But Santa Claus, the myth is not who we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the saint that inspired the story. And we're also going to be diving into, I guess, a little bit about how the real or kind of fictionalized aspects of
the
his
the
life
legendary Saint Nicholas,
feed
shall we say?
into what, Lauren, you have very, very succinctly and excellently
Thank
kind
you,
of
thank you.
summarized there. So who is Saint Nick when we talk about the actual real person? So this was an early Christian bishop who eventually was canonized as a saint, Saint Nicholas of Myra, and he was of Greek descent from the maritime city of Patara in Anatolia, which is basically a kind of modern day province of Turkey. So in that kind of like Mediterranean, Middle Eastern kind of space, we think, or historians think, that he was born in March around 270 to 276 Common Era. So in the 3rd century, I think that would make it. And
Yes,
we
we
also
always get
think,
that. Well, I always get
yeah.
that wrong, but yes, 3rd century. So
And
similar to what's his face, Arius.
yes, yes,
Similar era to our mate Arius from the
yes.
Goths.
And we also think that he probably died around the 6th of December in 343 Common Era. So the 6th of December is a very important day, which we will come back to later. But basically, this is a very, very old saint. Quite a lot of saints
One of the
are
OG saints.
yes, in that kind of initial kind of couple of 100 years into the Common Era. And because of the many miracles that contributed to his intercession, so basically to become a saint, you have to be able to prove that you have done, like, I think it's 2
Yeah.
miracles or a miracle, but he's done loads.
I think it's 2 because, and the
Yeah.
only reason I know this, dear listeners, is because I watched the Zac Efron documentary where he went to all these different places. Zac Efron is a very funny man, but one
Yeah.
of the things they did was they went to the Vatican and they talked to the guy who was currently responsible for validating miracles.
Yeah, because I
Um,
think it's like, well, once could just be a fluke. So if you can do 2,
yeah,
then that proves that you're really like in touch with the divine.
which, to be honest, is pretty much the current academic rigor for the scientific method.
Yeah.
Your study has to be replicable.
Yes, exactly. So it makes sense. But Saint Nicholas of Myra basically did so many miracles that he's basically known as Nicholas the Wonder Worker, which isn't
Oh,
it's not as catchy as Santa Claus, but it's still got quite a nice ring to
no.
it, I think.
I
So
quite
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
It sounds like the main character of like a children's fantasy novel. It's pretty appropriate.
yeah. So in this episode, we are going to be exploring some of the probably real, and also some of the probably fictitious aspects of his legend. But we can be sure that Santa Claus is based on a real person. Saint Nick did exist, and we know that he existed because he has a tomb that you can visit. And we are going to get back to that later in the episode, so do stick around to hear about Saint Nick's tomb. But first of all, we're going to go through some of what I think are the most interesting and gothic parts of his
So excited for
story.
this.
So first of all, I'm going to start with a story about gift giving, because I think this is probably one of the kind of legends associated with Saint Nick that really contributes to that Santa Claus mythical figure. So he was the original Saint Nick. He was very generous and very charitable, and he loved to help out the poor and those who were less fortunate than himself. So we can see already, like, yes, I can see how we get from this kind of like characteristic and trait to Santa Claus. And early on in his village, there was a man who had 3 daughters. And this account of this story is detailed in Michael the Archimandrite's hagiography, Life of Saint Nicholas. So we also, there are a couple of historical documents that we can trace
Do you
his
want to
existence and his
briefly
life in.
explain what a hagiography is?
Yes,
Because
I
there might be some
will.
people that aren't familiar with that.
A hagiography is essentially a biographical work that is specific to someone who is claimed to be a saint. So it is like it's a biography of a saint. And so people that write this, so Michael the Archimandrite, which I may be getting that name wrong, but apologies. But yeah, it's
I feel
essentially
a
he
subtle
wrote.
sense of sasatisfaction because I've
Yeah,
gotten so many
yeah.
mispronunciations over the last few episodes that I'm like, it's your turn now, bitch.
I have been thinking that when I did this, I was like, I need to make sure that I can say things, but obviously I'm still struggling with that.
Yep.
But yeah, he wrote what is essentially the biography of Saint Nick. It's called The Life of Saint Nicholas. So if you're interested, you can go and find that and read it and find out more about what Saint Nick did. But in this book, he details this story about this man with his 3 daughters. And allegedly, this individual had lost all of his wealth due to, and this is a quote, the plotting and envy of Satan. So Satan has been working against this man. He's lost all of his wealth. And obviously that then means that he can't afford to pay the dowry of his 3 daughters, which is quite bad because without a dowry in this period, women wouldn't have been able to get married. And there is a fear and a real, a probable kind of fear that his daughters could have ended up in prostitution. Enter Saint Nick. He's like, no, I don't want this. Like, Satan has been very bad, and these 3 women do not deserve this. So one night, he creeps up to this man's house.
To the window.
He's got a kind of sack full of gold, a sack full of money, tosses it into the house, and he creeps away. The next morning, the man and his 3 daughters wake up, and they find this gift of money. And the man is like, yes, amazing. I can rejoice, and I have the dowry for one of my daughters, and I can marry her off. And so he does that. And then the next night, Saint Nick creeps up to the man's house,
yeets it through the window
with another sack of money. Yeets
29.
it through the window. They wake up. Oh my gosh, I've got another, there's this other sack of gold. Amazing. Now I can pay for the dowry for my second daughter. This is wonderful. Third night, Saint Nick, thinking I am a genius. This is perfect. Creeps up to this house, opens a window, throws in another bag of gold and money. Man wakes up, brilliant. All of my daughters, I've got dowries for all of my daughters. They're going to be married. They're not going to have to go into a life of prostitution. So this is a really lovely story. And I think so historians have said that this story has quite a high probability of historicity, which means that it is probably true because there's only really this kind of like one account of this story. There's not this kind of story of, secretly giving money and dowry doesn't really appear in other historical sources. So it is that lends credence to it being real. And I think it also, it's really nice because he doesn't do it with any fanfare, because he doesn't necessarily, Saint Nick doesn't necessarily want all the attention. What he wants is he wants to be able to help these women.
Yes.
And he does so. And obviously we must have found out eventually because we know about this story. So maybe it was found out, but he's not doing it because he wants all of the accolades. It's mainly about gift giving and helping others, which I think is really nice.
Which And it does, like, I get that it's like the historicity is pretty like much not debated, because it makes a lot of sense both in terms of like early Christian ideals. Charity was a big one. There was quite a lot of early cults that were, you know, very sort of puritanical in the sense of like the later Puritans, and this
Yeah,
idea that you gave charity for the sake of charity. You weren't supposed to tell people you'd given charity. And
yeah,
also because there would have been, like, I'm not a Byzantine scholar, I'm not like an early classic scholar, but I do know that there was a lot of politics around the bride price and the dowry and all of that type of stuff.
yeah.
And a man going and giving money for three women would have
It's a bit
shamed the
weird.
father, but
Yeah,
also there, yeah, like there would have been, it would have become circumspect and it actually could have shamed them. Like, is the husband actually indebted to
yeah,
Nicholas instead of to the father and things like that? So yeah, giving
yeah,
it secretly makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
That tracks. I'll accept that one.
yeah. So
It's more
I think
believable than some of them.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's a really nice story, and you know, this happens in his kind of like early life. And it's
Mhm.
also a nice, you know, kind of like Santa Claus beefing with Satan. So it ticks
Yep.
that Gothic box, and it also ticks the
Hey, you
whole,
know
you
what
know,
it is? Chivalric.
oh, it is, yeah, yeah. Which brings me to my next kind of anecdote or story. Now, so this next story is one that I think has probably been misattributed to Saint Nick of Myra, because there is another Saint Nick. But basically what's happened is, and what happens in a lot of these kinds of cases of saints and historical figures, is that hundreds of years after the fact, people have gotten two people mixed up. And so these kind of stories have combined, and then there are works that are published that attribute this to one person when it should have been the other one. So this may or may not technically actually be Saint Nick of Myra, but I've
Our Saint
included
Nick.
our Saint Nick. But then at the same time, there are some works, some historical works that do include these stories as part of his mythology. So I think in building his kind of mythos, I'm going to include it because I also think that it's really fun. So this is
Awesome.
about demon banishments. So essentially, after he became Bishop of Myra, Nick was approached by the local villagers because there was a lot of demons that were kind of like causing disturbances.
Sorry,
And
I just love the idea that like these villagers come up and they're like, "There's some fucking incubi,
yeah,
succubi, like fucking
excuse me,
paimons
Nick.
over there."
Excuse me, Nick. If you've got some spare time, they basically had an infestation, a demon
Of
infestation
demons.
in a cypress tree. So Saint Nick, well, at this time he wasn't Saint Nick, so Nick,
He was just
Bishop of
Bishop
Myra,
Nick.
yeah, Bishop Nick, took an axe, swung the axe at the tree, and frightened the demons away. Which, I mean, if that's all you need to do to get rid of demons, amazing. Add that to your kind of list of ways to banish
I
demon
mean,
infestations.
that sounds legit. When I was a kid and we used to go and hang out on my mum's friend's farm, they used to give you a big stick, and if you saw a fox, you just had to run at it going, ah, and shit, like waving the stick. So demons, foxes,
Yeah,
probably much of the same.
exactly, exactly. And who are we to say that demons, especially in the kind of like 3rd century, wouldn't have been thought to have been more corporeal
Yeah.
and you know, physical and fleshly? So yeah, something
Listen, if
stuck in
I
a
was a demon
tree.
chilling in a cypress tree and someone ran towards me yelling with an axe, I would also run.
Yeah. And apparently this method, very, very high success rate. And it was so good that the neighboring village were like, oh,
Can you come and do it here,
Nick,
please?
we also have like a lot of demons, and they had a demon infestation in their well. So he goes to their village, does his same kind of thing, gets rid of the demons in his well. Yeah, great. And I'm like, do you know what? This is really useful. It's really useful skill, and I like the fact that he's,
Put that on
you
the
know,
CV.
challenging Satan in one story, fighting demons in the next, or banishing demons, you know. So pretty gothic, pretty
How
cool.
much do you want to bet it was just birds?
In a well, maybe a squirrel. Do squirrels go in wells?
I mean,
Fox?
maybe.
What do they have in Turkey?
Maybe it was foxes.
Maybe it was a cat.
Cat. I was just say cats. This is the second time we've talked about the cats in Turkey.
I know. Turkey's like up there in the list of countries in the world that love cats for me, and one day I will get there.
Yeah, I don't know what hangs out in Wales.
Yeah, I don't know.
Surely it's maybe birds. I'm just thinking, like in the same way that the duck-bill crane is probably Mothman.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
birds can be bastards, especially crows. They know when if you've wronged them,
and they will scream.
Sorry, this is off topic, but did you? Sorry, this is so distant. Did you know that raccoons can remember, and they're like one of the only other mammals that seek vengeance?
Oh, I love that.
So, like, if you wrong a raccoon,
it's also one of my favorite facts about elephants.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, if you wrong a raccoon, similar to an elephant, it will remember you and it'll fuck your shit up. Just
like Saint Nick. So, yeah, this story may be misattributed, but I just think it's a really nice little story.
It's a fun yarn.
This next story that I'm going to tell you, I think is probably, well, I mean, it's definitely attributed to Saint Nicholas of Myra. Whether it's true or not, obviously we can speculate and we can have our own opinions. But I just think that it's really nice. So Nick didn't stay in his village. He went traveling, and he also went to the Holy Lands because that's really important to do. And to get there, he went by boat, on a ship. And obviously, when you're on a ship, sometimes you encounter storms. And storms are really, really bad.
It's true.
But we have to remember here that we're not just dealing with any old person. We are dealing with Saint Nicholas of Myra. And when he was confronted with these storms, he was like, no, not having it, not having it. He rebuked the waves, said, no, go away. I've got somewhere to be. And the storm subsided.
He said, like, I am literally God's strongest soldier.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's so cool. He's like, I need to get here. Nothing's going to stop me. And because of this, he is the patron saint of so many things. But because of this story, he's the patron saint of sailors and travelers. And I just think, like, amazing, like being able to, because storms are pretty wild. And especially like back in the day when you would get on a ship and then maybe you've not, you don't know where you're going, and then you're on this like body of water, you can't see anything else. Maybe it's the first time you've been on a ship and you encounter like storms and waves and crashing winds and all of this sound, and it's really terrible. Like, you understand why nautical Gothic is a thing, but then just being able to be the power of the big man upstairs, I'm gonna
it's kind of, being a saint is kind of like the MLM thing. Like, the first lot of saints got to be patron saint of so many things.
Yeah.
And then, like, as time's gone on, it's like, what are you the patron saint of? Oh, dentists. Like,
yes. Yeah. Well,
Saint Nick got in there early.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. And, dentistry, it's a good profession,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Say the two people that are terrified of the dentist.
I know. Like, I appreciate my dentist, but also no thank you. Swiftly changing the subject to
yes.
I don't know if this is happier things, but Lauren, this is one story that I know that you're going to enjoy.
Pickle Boys. Pickle Boys.
Yes.
Pickle Boys.
In my notes, I have this down as Pickle Boys. And this is also, believe it or not, really, really central to the eventual legend of Santa Claus. And I will explain.
Yeah.
So, do you want to, I do have notes about this, but do you want to kind of give us a kind of like what on earth? Pickle Boys? What does this mean?
Pickle Boys.
What does this mean?
Yeah. So,
What are we talking about?
I believe the story is that there were three young boys who were either possibly employed by or nearby of a certain, I can't remember if he's a butcher or something,
A
but the story
butcher.
basically goes that this butcher murders these three boys and essentially pickles them. Like he's brining them. We assume to commit Sweeney Todd style
Yeah,
meat selling.
because essentially
And
there's a famine. There's a famine
yes,
going on, and obviously when you're in the food industry, but especially when you're a butcher, you're like, well, there's a famine. What am I
yeah,
going to sell? How am I going to feed people and earn a living?
human meat famously tastes like pork,
Long
according to
pig.
sources.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, essentially this butcher kills these three boys and he pickles them, which is the done thing, particularly in a era pre-refrigeration, because otherwise how do you keep the meat from
Yep.
going bad? And Saint Nick is like, no, 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 no. And he goes in and he says, be free, Pickle Boys. And he brings the Pickle Boys back to the life. The life. And the Pickle Boys rise from the pickle barrel, reborn. In some artistic renditions, they have already been chopped into pieces and the pieces reform. But there's a really famous piece of art that I saw when I was in Milan last year. And
Yeah.
it is a visual hagiography of Saint Nicholas,
Yeah.
and it has each line of the artwork, and you see this a lot in saint art. It has a name, and I'm sorry, I don't know. Hannah would know. But it's basically like each line is one of the miracles, and it's this really great, like, yeah, kind of like Saint Nick's there and the boys are coming out of the barrel and it's like, ah. And I took a picture of it and sent it to Mary and I was like, the Pickle Boys. The reason being because our idol Shane Madej did an episode of Puppet History about Saint Nicholas, and there's a whole section plus a song about the Pickle Boys, and it's very, very funny. We love the Pickle Boys, and when I
Yeah.
saw the Pickle Boy art, I was like, because for some reason my brain was like forgot that it was actually a real thing, and it was really funny being in this like beautiful museum of religious art with all these really kind of like, you know, there's like Da Vinci's and shit in there, and I'm like, Pickle Boys, Pickle Boys.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly. And
essentially, Saint Nick brought the Pickle Boys back to life.
and you might be thinking, listening to us reminisce about the Pickle Boy song and, you know, this story about the Pickle Boys, thinking, but I'm sure that you said that this was connected to the story of Santa Claus. And I'm going to tell you exactly
Mhm.
how it kind of does feed into the myth of Santa Claus. So essentially, this story, unlike the dowry story, this doesn't appear in the early hagiographical works of Saint Nick of Myra. So those early kind of saintly biographies of Nick don't mention this at all. So historians,
No Pickle Boys in the early
no
versions.
pickle boys, no, it's a pickle-free zone. Um, and historians essentially say that this was probably a medieval edition.
That
You know,
makes sense, because you know what people fucking loved in the medieval? Pickling things.
they love pickling things, and also this is where we get I mean, I'm so glad that you mentioned that piece of art or pieces of art, because I think this is one of
That's what
the
it's from.
really important ways that the story of Saint Nick, but specifically the story of Saint Nick and the Pickle Boys, spread across Europe. Stories were often told in artwork, so
Mhm.
we're thinking like stained glass windows, wood panels, paintings, tapestries, frescoes. They're a way. You have to think like this is before most populations were literate. So you're not really going to be going
And
around.
everything's in Latin.
Everything's in Latin if you can read Latin, but most people won't have access to, you know, you're not going to pick up the life of Saint Nick, and you're not going to pick up, you know, you're going to be relying on the kind of the priest, the bishop who's telling you the sermon, but
Mhm.
also in the church and in other kinds of spaces, you're going to have these beautiful, brilliant stained glasses and paintings and pictures everywhere to communicate a story. So this was one of the ways that Saint Nick was kind of memorialized and his story was told. So you would have, this kind of image of him, and it's often him, so Saint Nick, standing in front of a barrel with 3 young boys.
And the boys are proportionally ridiculous.
Yeah. And you would have, as you've said, you would have like some images that would be kind of like a multi-part image where it would tell the story. But eventually, because genuinely, this story was such a popular story that you didn't need it. You didn't need the whole kind of like part 1, part 2, part 3. You could just have an image of Saint Nick and the 3 boys in a barrel, and people would know that, that's Nick and the Pickle Boys.
Nick and the Pickle Boys. Nick's got his
brought
big
back to life.
halo. Yeah. And the Pickle Boys are like these weird little emaciated.
Yeah. Or like, sometimes he's got like the bishop kind of like the bishop stuff. Dress.
The bishop
mitra and
garb, mitra.
Garb.
Oh, yes, it is called a mitra. I only know that because of Final Fantasy.
Yeah,
because that's one of the weapons. What is the bishop's hat called? It must have a name. Write in and tell us what a bishop's hat is called.
the big pointy one.
The big pointy one.
But eventually, so these images, just a single image. So it did initially start off, as you said, being that kind of like multi-part sequence of images. But eventually, then it was just one image. This was everywhere. But then, as the years go on, people kind of forgot what the full story was. And so they were looking at this,
of the boys.
They were looking at this image. Yeah, so they were looking at this image and thinking, what does this mean? What does this mean? Here is Saint Nick. We know that it's Saint Nick, and he's with 3 children.
Why is there 3 naked boys in a barrel?
He must be, and this is what I think is really funny. So he must be either the patron saint of children, hence Santa Claus, the association with children and all this kind of stuff, or alternatively, and genuinely he is also the patron saint of this, he's sometimes referred to as the patron saint of brewing and brewers because of the barrels.
I mean, it makes sense. I would have gone to patron saint of Jeffrey Epstein's Island if I'd seen an image like that and not known the backstory.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah.
But that's me with my 2025 brain on, being like, there's a man looking at 3 naked boys in a barrel. You know, without the context of the fact that he'd potentially reassembled them and brought them back to life.
Yeah.
But yeah, he like most commonly is the patron saint of children in that respect.
Yeah. So you can see how the kind of like the myth of Santa Claus is connected to the real / not quite so real story of Saint Nick. You know, he likes to give presents. He's very generous, and also he's associated with saving children. And he's just badass, but I don't really think that translates into the story of Santa Claus, really.
Yeah,
but
there's less. I mean, he manages to make it around the world in a single night. So if he did have power over the waves,
yeah, and I guess he is the patron saint of traveling. So that does that does feed into things. But yeah, that is. I knew that would be your favorite one. And obviously,
I fucking love those Pickle Boys, man.
Obviously, we're not going to talk about Saint Nick without talking about the Pickle Boys. You just
it was like, I'm gonna do Saint Nick for the Christmas episode, and I was like, the Pickle Boys.
Yeah.
Not to be a broken record, but honestly, there really is something very special about standing there in Milan, you know, in the kind of like shadow of the Duomo. It's beautiful art, the masters of the Renaissance, and you're like sending your best friend photos of boys pickled in a barrel.
And I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Exactly. I knew you'd be excited as I was. I wasn't like, oh my God, there's the Da Vinci. It's the woman in the stole. I was like, the Pickle Boy.
Yeah. Obviously, there are lots and lots and lots of stories connected to Saint Nick and his life. As I mentioned at the start, like there are so many miracles connected to him that he has that whole like, wonder worker name. I've picked out some of my favorite that I think are especially Gothic. It's I couldn't like, there are literally hagiographies written about this person.
Yeah.
So we only had one episode, but I do want to finish on something that I think is really important to the continuation of his myth. So obviously during his life, he was such a kind of celebrated figure. And when people like Saint Nick die, they are venerated a lot.
They are indeed venerated.
Which brings us to the bones of Saint Nick and why his very bones
we love a reliquary.
Exactly. So originally, Saint Nick was believed to have been buried in his hometown of Myra, and there is a tomb there. As I mentioned, like at the start, like we know that he was a real person because he has a tomb that you can go and visit. Although some historians also argue that he was actually entombed in a rock-cut church located at the highest point on the small Turkish island of Gemil. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is known as Saint Nicholas Island, or also the Island of Boats, which kind of fits in with his whole I'm the patron saint of sailors and travellers and all that kind of stuff. However, and I think this is very Gothic in and of itself, his burial has not been very peaceful. So,
any saint burials?
Well,
peaceful?
yes. We know that the bones of saints, as you've mentioned, they are a specific kind of relic that are highly sought after, just being the bones. So, and there are loads of, as we'll get it, in the next year, as I said, we're going to dive into some more saints, and we'll maybe explore some who have the jawbone and different kinds of bits that are venerated in different churches of different saints. There is something specific about the bones of Saint Nick, though, that makes them even extra special, and that is that allegedly his bones exude a clear, watery liquid which smells like rose water, and it's called manna or myrrh. And this liquid is believed by those who believe, so the faithful, to possess miraculous powers. So you want his bones, not just because he's an amazing person that you want to celebrate and worship, but because they secrete this liquid that can be miraculous. This liquid only appears once a year, so like every year they kind of secrete
the ceremonial secretion.
Yes, which means then obviously we know that the bones of saints are up there in terms of like highly sought after religious
they're
relics.
Supposed to have divine qualities.
Yeah, but these bones are like probably in the history of like saints' bones and relics are some of the most sought after. It's probably, do you know what? Probably it goes stuff that apparently comes from Jesus Christ himself, or
like the
whatever.
Shroud of Turin, and
the Shroud of Turin, the cross, his bones, like anything of that,
the nails.
especially in the medieval period. I mean, you could probably make an entire village out of the wood that was sold. Sorry, not the
shards of the true
the
cross.
shards of the cross. Yeah, but it's probably those relics and then Saint Nick. And because of that, people went into his tomb, his bones. You can find them in so many different places. And
he has highly sought after bones.
So yes, even in death, he is still traveling, which I think is really interesting and also kind of a bit creepy.
It's really fascinating that it's called manna, because that is usually in like Greco-Roman mythology, manna is like the blood of the gods. Which it does have healing properties. So it makes sense that like theological idea, I suppose, is the best way to term it. Like
exactly.
transferred onto saints.
Yes.
I never really thought about it like that, but it makes sense. But yeah, I'd not realized that I was not aware of the secretion.
No, no. It is a interesting, fun. Don't know if I would say fun, but interesting aspect of Saint Nick, and one that
Yep.
also has not kind of transferred into the legend of Santa Claus. Probably for the best. Goodness
Can
sake.
you imagine?
Yeah.
Children, when you sit on Santa Claus's lap,
Oh no,
you'll,
no!
you'll secrete clear liquid that smells of rose water.
I don't like it. Don't like that image. Let's move on. So I wanna finish. I'm gonna finish with 2 recommendations. If you want to find out more about the Gothic
Can
Saint
I
Nick,
can I ask a question before
yes,
you make your
yes,
recommendations?
yes, you
So
may.
obviously we know that like the reason that Santa Claus is the 6th of December is because that's when Saint Nick is supposed to have died. So that's is it the Dutch or Scandinavian
I'm going
festival?
to get onto that. Yes,
Okay, cool. Do
yes.
you know, because this is the question I've always had, is like there is that kind of, I don't know if it's like, it's not an urban legend, but like part of the legend I suppose is that there was like Father Yule and things like that, like that part of the Santa Claus mythology is taken from pre-Christian like folklore and stuff like that. Does that track in the research you've done, or is it one of those where like they've placed Saint Nick in that role, or is it kind of a bit more erroneous and it's just a natural things blend over time?
I would say it's probably a blending of different things. But
Yeah.
I'm going to finish on Sinterklaas actually. But before we
Cool.
get there,
Okay, good.
I had one thing that connects to the bones of Saint Nicholas. So there is an episode of the TV series Inside Number 9 called The Bones of Saint Nicholas. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the show, it's a kind of anthology series created by, written by, directed, and starring Reese Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, who did quite a lot of kind of gothic-y and satirical parody stuff.
If you like British like black comedy and
Yeah.
like kind of, if you liked anything like The Mighty Boosh or like
Is it the League of Extraordinary
The
Gentlemen?
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen,
Yeah.
like what's the other one that had like Richie Odayowadi and stuff in? But yeah, if you like any of that kind of like Friday night BBC weirdness, you've
Yeah.
probably come across these guys.
And they are very, not all of the episodes are necessarily horror. They're all very weird. And this series,
Mhm.
Inside Number 9, so every episode is about the number 9 in some way. But this episode is essentially Dr. Parkway, who's played by Steve Pemberton. He's booked an overnight stay on Christmas Eve in a church that is supposedly haunted. And then he soon finds out in this episode that he's not the only one there. So other people kind of turn up, and it's kind of like, oh, like why are you here? And it's like, we can share this space, all this kind of stuff.
We're
He's
here to
there with
touch the bones.
he's there with his partner. He just thought it would be nice, waking up in a church on Christmas Day. I mean, I was going to say I don't know that I
You do
would be
you,
interested
boo.
in that, but actually, maybe I
I
would
was
be
just about to
interested
say,
in
don't
that.
lie.
No,
You love
I know.
that.
Yeah.
You love churches.
But it apparently the other people that turn up are there because this church has some of the bones of Saint Nick, which I think is actually really interesting. When I watched the episode, I think it first aired in 2022, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't know everything about like the bones of Saint Nick,
Mhm.
and doing this research, I was like, this episode makes so much more sense now because obviously, you're watching this episode with no context and thinking, why
You're
on
like,
earth,
okay, sure.
why would the bones of like Saint Nick be in this random English church? That doesn't make
Mhm.
any sense. But no, it does, because as we all know now, his bones got everywhere. So they traveled around. So yeah, if you're interested in what?
His bones got
Yeah, they did. They're in so many different countries.
You said that with such innocent conviction.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I do have a very childish sense of humour.
Do you know what? It's Christmas.
If you couldn't tell from my love of the Pickle Boys and my repeated jokes about the bone.
Yeah. If you want to, so if you like that part of his story, you want to know more about his bones, then find this episode. Watch this episode. It's just a really nice Christmas kind of gothic-y, kind of hour-ish to watch. But yeah,
because some of them are really creepy.
Some of them are very, very creepy. Yeah. So yeah, and then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was Santa Claus, because I think
Santa Claus.
Yeah, I don't think we would have Santa Claus without Santa Claus. And as you mentioned, Santa Claus is specifically from Dutch culture, and it's how this kind of story traveled to America. It was Dutch colonies that kind of spread the story of Santa Claus,
which then became that makes sense.
Which then became Santa Claus. Originally, he was green. We all know the story about how Coca-Cola turned him red. So obviously, in these kinds of original Santa Claus stories, he would be dressed in green.
He looks like the folkloric like fathers of the forest and like old men of the woods and things like that, like in older artwork.
And I think that this is an example of how the story of Saint Nicholas of Myra then does kind of combine with those more local traditions and it blends. And I'm going to recommend a horror film now that is all about Santa Claus for anyone that is interested in this Dutch kind of side of things. Unfortunately, Lauren, I don't think you can watch this.
No, you can absolutely give me presents on the 6th of December, because that's what you do for Santa Claus. So, but I will not be watching whatever you're about to recommend.
If, unlike Lauren, you like your horror festive or you like your festivities horror-based, then I'm going to recommend to you a 2010 Dutch horror film directed by Dick Maas, and it's called Sint. So Sint for Santa Claus. And this story essentially distorts the popular Dutch traditions of Santa Claus and portrays him as a ghost who murders a large number of people on his annual celebration night, which is the 6th of December, although I think in the film it's actually the 5th, the night of the 5th that goes into the 6th.
That would make sense, I think.
It's when that night coincides with a full moon. So essentially what you have is in this film, and I'm gonna send you some pictures of the ghost of Santa Claus, because it's very cool. He's got a horse, he rides around, in his full kind of like bishop gear. There's lots of obviously full moon imagery. It's very, very spooky. He is not nice.
So he wears his bishop outfit?
Yeah. Saint Nicholas.
Not historically accurate, but sick.
It's not historically accurate at all. Saint Nicholas is an evil bishop who was killed 475 years ago, and he murders...
Oh, okay, that is more historically accurate.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly as old as Saint Nick, but it is still connected in.
Well, 475 years ago, wearing a bishop outfit is more. I was like, there was no bishop outfits in the 3rd century in that way.
But so every time that this December the 5th coincides with a full moon,
he comes back. Headless Huntsman? Oh my god, maybe he's the Wild Hunt.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, no, maybe. And then
he's on a horse.
Yes, and maybe on, like, if there's a full moon and it's his night,
on the
he's
6th
like,
of
yo,
December.
can I get, here's my slip. I've got
can I borrow
special...
it? Yeah. Hits up Francis Drake and is like, it's my turn to lead the hunt.
Yeah. So
if you haven't listened to our Wild Hunt episode, go back and listen to it because
go
this
and
will
watch
make
that.
sense.
Yeah. But yeah, those are my two kind of recommendations. If you want some
Amazing.
more Gothic, horror, Santa Claus, Saint Nick kind of content, The Bones of Saint Nicholas, Sint, excellent films. And
Nice.
if like Lauren, you not really that into horror, then
Well,
absolutely go and check out the
yeah.
puppet episode on Saint Nick.
Yeah,
Santa
go and
Claus.
watch Puppet History. Or
Yes.
if you're just like wanting some Saint vibes, go and listen to Rosalia's new album, Lux, because it is like classical meets flamenco and it's all inspired by saints, but it's like modern and it's like about like heartbreak and stuff. And I'm just really excited because I got a ticket to go and see her in London at her like sold out show. So I'm just throwing it out there as a slight humble brag, but also because
Yeah.
I do think some of our listeners will actually really like this album and
Yeah.
hear music because there's parts of it that are very like
And
sonically gothic.
you know, it's the season of giving, and how else, like what better way to, you know, embody the spirit of giving that Saint Nick
Yeah,
really kind of modeled for all of
yeah,
us than
exactly.
to
And I would just
to
like to
share.
end by saying that I have been distracted by myself in the camera this entire episode because I've owned this jumper for 2 years and I never realized it was sparkly. And it's only sparkling when I move under the ring light and unintentionally festive.
Yes.
That's a treat for you YouTube viewers. Is my
What a
sparkly
treat.
jumper.
What a treat. So yeah, that is the Gothic life of Saint Nicholas.
The
If
real
you
saints of the Gothic.
Yes, if you have any recommendations for other saints that we should dive into that you think are
Yeah,
especially Gothic, then message us
yeah.
or comment wherever
Let
you
us
listen
know.
to.
I already
If
have one
you
that I'm either going to force Mary
Yeah,
to do or do myself.
yes. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please do like and subscribe and also comment. We love hearing from
Yeah,
you.
please comment.
This
Follow us
is
on
we are
Instagram as well. I'm trying to get better at Instagram, so please go and find us on Instagram at the Ghoul Guides.
Yes, whatever platform you like, please, you know, give us a follow. Let us know if you like our content. Let us know if there's anything that you want us to dive into in the new year. We are obviously getting close to the end of 2025. This is our little festive offering. If you haven't watched our episode on the Cult of Mithras, then now is your time to do that as another festive episode. But yeah, I guess until next time, stay merry, stay safe, and stay spooky.
Stay merry, stay safe, and stay spooky. Love it. Bye, y'all.